Now to the best part of the day. We get to hear from a successful and wonderful entrepreneur. I have met Louise a few years ago and had the pleasure to find out her story and write about it, as you've seen in the case that you've read. And what makes Louise special is her passion for changing the world, just like many of you who expressed it earlier on. And the way that she looked at the problem and wanted to do something about it. And as you've seen in the case, used crowdfunding as a way to grow the company and then brought it to what it is today, and also made the right and also difficult decisions to merge, to think about whether to stay here, whether to go to another country, and what country that should be. So lots of decisions, lots of challenges, lots of learning opportunities. And what I love about Louise is that she's so open about it. So let's welcome Louise to tell the story of GoHenry.
Thank you. Thank you, Pina, and thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to come and speak to you today. So I'm going to say up front, I'm not as polished as some of the speakers and professors, etc. in the room at using slides. I only have two. I've got the first one right. Okay, so where did this start from? I was asked probably about 6 months ago what was the first sign of me having an entrepreneurial streak. And I thought, gosh, when did that start? Was it my first job? Was it part-time jobs? And then I suddenly thought of this black and white picture, which was taken in, I can't work out if it's 1970 or 1971, because I am very old, of my brother and I. And I had asked my dad to make me a shop for Christmas. And bless him, he had made that shop out of hardboard and wood. And the shelves were stacked with Kellogg's variety packs. I had a little plastic cash register on the counter, if you can see that. And I spent the next 3 months selling anybody who came to the house, including my parents, a Kellogg's variety pack, and then solemnly taking it back from them, putting it on the shelves, and selling it to them again 5 minutes later. So maybe that was the first sign that I was destined perhaps not to work for other people, but to start a business. So in the early days, I'm going to give you a potted history. I actually studied languages all the way through A-levels and university. I thought I wanted to be an interpreter, and went all the way through to open competitions for the EU, unbelievably got a place at the EU, went to Brussels, and absolutely hated it. And, you know, thinking back now, I have no idea why I thought that was a good job for me, because it really didn't have the level of freedom and creativity that I know I need to keep me going. So I came back to the UK. I managed to get on a graduate trainee course with the House of Fraser and got sent to Cardiff, and spent the next 18 months working around each department in the department store, from the legal team to the front of house team to the restaurant, visual merchandising, running the different departments, learning a huge amount about retail, the good old phrase, retail is detail. But very quickly again realised at that point in time, which would have been the late 80s, that there was not a single woman in the management structure above department manager. And I thought, yeah, I'm not hanging around for that. And I joined an American management consultancy who were launching in Europe, and spent the next 6 years having the most fantastic time working all over Europe, using my languages, working all over Europe. And the way we worked with a company, we would go into a company, help them to identify efficiencies and improvements, and then stay and work with both the management team and whatever form the shop floor took in that organisation to actually deliver the results. And I loved that. It taught me to very quickly build bonds with people, to very quickly identify the key levers in the business, the things that were really going to impact the P&L that could be carried through to the bottom line. And then I also learnt, go to the shop floor, talk to the people who are doing the work, because they know where all the inefficiencies are. And if you can take them back to management and get them resolved, you can really make a difference. So I did that for 6 years. The last project I ran for them was helping Next, the retail chain, to launch Next Directory. And a lot of you in this room are too young to remember, but Next Directory in the UK was the first time that what used to be the old agent model, where, I don't know if any of you remember, there were great big mail order catalogues that typically a housewife would have. My mum had a Grattan catalogue, and they would take it round to all their friends to take orders. The orders would be shipped to my mum, and mum would then drive them round to her friends and collect the money. Next disrupted that model, and they were the first big B2C home shopping organisation, and I spent 18 months working to help them launch that up in Bradford near Leeds. And it was just as the internet was getting powerful enough that e-commerce began to be a reality. And Next jumped with both feet straight into e-com. I was still working alongside them at that time, and it kind of catapulted me into this new world where suddenly all of the bricks and mortar retailers in the UK and around the world wanted people who understood e-com, who understood the logistics behind home shopping and could help them make that transition. So from 6 years with the management consultancy, I then spent another, probably 20 years working in the e-com space. And that included helping John Lewis launch their first ever transactional website, helping Debenhams launch their first ever transactional website, working with lots of names you'll know today, the White Company, Hotel Chocolat, that was a good one, a good place to work. The Innovations Group, big stable of catalogues, all sorts of e-com companies. And that also included a period where I launched my own. So I was working for the Innovations Group. They got sold because we didn't really know what the future was. The buying director there and I got together. And what we could see with e-com is that it was very much servicing what I would call the kind of Scandi style, very modern loft apartment style homewares. And we knew there were a huge number of people in the UK who liked much more traditional, old-fashioned, kind of English country vicarage style. And so we launched a catalogue and e-com brand called Manners and succeeded in trading that for 4 years, after which I sold it to a big retail group. Went back to working for other people, working as an independent contractor to e-com groups. And that was when I would say inspiration for GoHenry struck, but it wasn't really I suddenly had the idea about teaching kids about money. That's not what happened. Both of my kids had been bought the tiny little square iPod Nanos for Christmas by my brother. And I had, foolishly it turned out, given my kids the login to my iTunes account, which of course had my credit card attached to it. Put the pieces together. They were having a great time. They were spending an absolute flipping fortune. And, as a mum, I was trying to figure out, one, how do I stop them spending so much of my money? But actually, two, how do I get them to understand that every click is spending money? Because there was nothing tangible, nothing for them to see. And also that money has to come from somewhere. Me. So what I did was to start printing out the invoices that way back then, iTunes used to actually send you an email with an invoice attached for every, I think it was 79p download. And I started printing those out, pinning them on the fridge with a magnet, 2 piles for my 2 kids. And then on a Saturday morning, as they stood in front of me with their hands out, we would have this awful conversation where it would be, yeah, I know you would normally get £5 pocket money, but here's your invoices, you've only got 83 pence left. Hand over the coins, sad face in front of me, and mum's the bad guy again. And I started, I was talking to other parents about it. Any of you who are parents will know that you talk to lots of other parents to try and find tricks and hacks to help you maneuver some of the subtleties of parenting. And I started talking to other people, and all these stories came out. Stories came out about, this is a true story, a good friend of mine. Her 11-year-old had managed to spend £600 on eBay, no concept that £600 is quite a lot of money, on what he thought was a model car. And it got delivered to her house on the back of a flatbed truck. It was not a model car, it was a full-size wreck of a car. A little girl who'd run up a £2,000 bill on her dad's credit card, buying scrunchies and pony hair ties for her little pony on an online game. You've all heard the stories. You've all heard the stories. Kids were doing this. And what I realised was we'd effectively left kids behind. We were all using cards. Contactless was just emerging onto the market. We were all shopping online. What we hadn't realised is so are kids, in a different way to adults, but so were kids. And there appeared to be nothing out there to help them and to help parents control it and teach their kids about it. So that was the idea, if you like. So yes, I often say I blame my kids. The company I set about thinking about, number one, how do I research? Is there anything out there already? Very quickly it became apparent that there isn't, and I don't just mean in the UK. We couldn't find anything anywhere in the world that addressed this problem. And then the next question was, well, what would we have to build? What would it look like to address the problem? And then, was there a business model at the back of that could be a commercial business model? And I turned to two friends, two dads who had kids at the same school as mine, and the three of us started to meet every Thursday night in a curry house on Lymington High Street, which is where I still live, to work out whether we could figure out how to do this. And that is very much what we then decided to do. So when I look back, one of the questions I've asked myself is, what skills did I take into building GoHenry? And on reflection, I don't think GoHenry would exist if I hadn't learned an awful lot from my previous career. I'd learned to build teams. I'd learned to identify very quickly the key levers in a business. I guess I'd learned negotiation, I'd learned supply chain skills, all sorts of things like that. What I didn't know was anything about financial services or anything about banking, and that is still the question I get asked most often today. As soon as somebody knows about GoHenry, they say, oh, did you come from a banking background? Well, no, I didn't. But the fact that I came from kind of an operations background, maybe I say this because I've been in operations all my life, but I think that gives you a hugely wide range of skills that you can apply to pretty much any business in the world. And so those transferable skills I brought to the business, but I also had to learn the skills of asking hundreds of questions until financial services, banking, regulations, all of those things made sense to me. So how do we start to build a company? I've always been a firm believer in learning by doing. And I often talk about money skills being a life skill and being akin to swimming. You can learn the theory, but until the day you get in the water and actually have a go, you're never going to learn to swim. And I think money skills are the same. You can learn the theory, you can learn compound interest and capital markets and all sorts of things like that. But until you've actually got money and you spend money and you use money in the different ways we do in society, those lessons don't actually hit home. So we set about building a debit card for kids with real money Still not sure how I managed to blag my way into a meeting with Visa when all we had was a bit of a dream. But we did get hold of Visa's innovation department, and they were fantastic. They were incredibly supportive, and we've stayed with Visa for many, many years, with one exception in the US for a couple of years, but we're back with Visa again now. One of the things I wanted to talk about with building any company, and many of you here who've done that yourselves will know, it takes a huge amount of work to get any new business off the ground. When it is an entirely new category, it's even more work. Because in that kind of nanosecond of somebody's attention that you have, you're not only trying to sell your company to them, you have to explain what you are and why they need you. And we made a huge number of mistakes in trying to figure out the best way to do that. We spent a lot of time talking to schools, thinking that we could reach children through the school network via the parents. I spent a huge amount of time in places where parents are with their children. So football tournaments, the local shopping centre on a Saturday morning, outside cinema complexes. And what I can tell you from that is when parents are out with their kids, they want to spend time with their kids. They don't want to listen to somebody trying to sell them something. What we eventually realised was digital advertising was the best way to reach the first customers. And that continues to be true today. But the very, very strong second channel, I don't think it will surprise you, is we call it advocacy, word of mouth. Word of mouth. Any parent who's found something that works for them tells other parents. And upwards of 40% of all of our new customers today come either from a refer a friend code, or when we talk to that new customer kind of 4, 5, 6 weeks in and ask them how they heard about us, it's one of their friends told them or a family member told them. So that advocacy, that word of mouth, is an incredibly powerful sales tool. Building the company didn't come without sacrifices. I had 2 young kids. I had a big mortgage. I was divorced, so it was just me trying to pay the bills. And that meant working, again, as with most startups, days, nights, weekends, holidays. What were holidays? I sat the children down and said, I don't know whether they understood really or not at the time, but told them that foreign holidays were probably going to be a thing of the past for a couple of years. We even got rid of our Sky subscription, anything to cut down costs so that I could take the lowest possible salary out of the business but keep paying the mortgage and feed the kids to get the business going. And actually, as part of that, when my daughter hit 18, she decided, after we'd done the tour of half the universities in the UK, it felt, that she wanted to join the company. And that is actually 9 years ago, and she just celebrated her 9th anniversary with the company. She's now in our HR team, we call it our people team, as a people partner. But I realise I've done that one, early day struggles and advocacy. One of the things we also got wrong at the beginning, we were called pocket money. And Lord knows why I thought this was a clever name, but we spelt it without any vowels, so we were PKTMNY, which, if you think about being a digital brand that you want somebody to be able to type into a Google search without any hesitation, pocket money with no vowels is not a good idea. And very quickly that became apparent from phone calls where people would say, can I speak to Louise at or in press articles where inevitably the journalists would write, they're called pocket money, it's sort of tech speak, do you see what they've done there? And it's like, oh my God, how did we think that was clever? where the name GoHenry comes from, we spent time with a branding agency. Because I always talk about having a go, learning by doing, we anchored onto the go concept. And we were not liking any of the proposals, go this, go that the branding agency had come up with. One of our operations managers walked across the floor in the office. She was doing something completely different. She was actually flagging beta test customers in the database so that we could strip them out of any reporting when we were looking at customer behaviours. And she said, guess what the name was? Guess what the name is of the first child ever to use one of our cards? So it was a little boy called Henry. He was 11 years old, lived in Bristol. The next question I always get asked is, does he know? So I will answer that one. Yes, he does now. He didn't then. When we hit 1 million customers in the UK, we kind of launched a campaign to say the millionth child, we would invite the family to come and spend a week with GoHenry. And we contacted his family as well and said, you don't know this, but you were actually the first family. Would you like to come and join us as well? So he came and joined us. That was several years ago now. He launched a series for us that we call GoHenry Grads, which is looking at kids who've graduated from GoHenry, have hit 18, gone on to other banking platforms, and look at how they use money, how they feel about money, how their experience compares to their peers. It's an interesting series. It's an interesting series. He launched that. So I'll talk a little bit about the funding. Pinar made reference to the fact that we crowdfunded. When I first wanted to set the business up, we had to get what was then quite a lot of pre-seed funding. We raised just under £700,000 from angel investors. Managed to get launched with that. You never get as far as you think you're going to get with the money. Or certainly that's my experience and a lot of other founders that I know now. We went out for another round of funding from those same angels, plus a lot of them brought in friends and other people who might be interested for a second round. And then when we were ready to look for, we thought, £2 to £3 million of funding, I got approached by Crowdcube to say, we think you're the perfect business to try crowdfunding. I know it's a fairly new thing in the UK, but would you have a go? And so my approach was, well, why wouldn't we? Let's give it a go, but obviously we're going to have to go to VCs and all the usual routes as well. What actually happened was, we had a runaway success with it. We became, at that point in time, there was a legal limit of €5 million. You couldn't raise more than that through pure equity crowdfunding. And we hit the £2 million target in 2 days before we'd gone to any external Crowdcube customers at all. That was from existing investors and our own customers. And then we reached the 4 million about a week and a half later. And sorry, just to explain, £4 million at the time was almost exactly €5 million. So we had to close the crowdfunding. And it was an amazing experience. What I didn't expect was the impact it had on our teams. We thought about it from treating it as a marketing campaign and getting awareness of the brand out to a wider public. Hadn't thought about the motivational impact on everybody who worked at GoHenry, or even some of the companies, the suppliers, the critical suppliers who worked alongside us in terms of getting excited and seeing the results we were having. So we didn't go to VCs at that point. That was 2016. Got to get my dates right here. In 2018, when we wanted more money because we'd launched the product in the US, but basically didn't have enough money left to really market it and push hard, we thought, well, let's do it again. And we ran a second crowdfunding campaign, and we raised £6.2 million, again, pure equity crowdfunding, which I think makes me and a lady called Tamara Lohan, who runs Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the hotel booking service. We're the biggest female crowdfunders, I think, in the UK at the moment. Thank you. Somebody will knock me off that pedestal at some point, and that absolutely should happen. So what happened after that? We pushed hard in the US. Again, some false starts, some things we got right, some things we got horribly wrong, but started to grow steadily in the US and ended up running our A series of funding in 2020, and I've come to call that a very late stage A series. At that point, we had no VCs on the board, which was you can look at that two ways. It was one of the benefits of crowdfunding. There was no investor that we had to keep happy on the board who might not have had the same direction of travel as us, or might have. But the negative was there wasn't an investor, a VC, sat on the board who either could follow again for the late stage A series or indeed could introduce us on to other VCs, warm introductions into growth funds, that sort of thing. And because I hadn't come from the banking background or that kind of venture background, I didn't have those contacts. And our A series was long and hard fought. I've said this in a lot of talks. We pitched to 103 funds in the UK, a few of them in Europe, and we found 7 funds who were prepared to follow, but nobody who was prepared to lead. And that was bruising. That was really bruising. We were convinced we were doing the right thing. We were growing. As far as we were concerned, we got the numbers. We could show the growth. We could show the improved EBITDA as we went forward. But nobody was prepared to lead the round. So we kind of, withdrew hurt in a way, and decided we would go to the US, where we knew nobody, other than the supply chain teams that we worked with over there. And we found a lead for the fund in 3 months. And then 2 of the people who'd said they would follow in the UK and Europe followed, and we raised $40 million. The people who led the round were Edison Growth Partners, followed by Revire, who run a Tech for Good fund, City Ventures and Muse Partners. That was our late stage A. Then we were introduced to a company called Acorns in the US. And I don't know how many of you will have heard the name of Acorns, but Acorns is very much a mission-led company as well. They position themselves as democratizing investing. So their concept, if you think in the UK, a little bit like Moneybox or Nutmeg or Plum, it's democratizing investing for their phrase, the everyday American. They started about 10 years ago with put away $1 a day being their call to action. And they had built out an investing platform, a banking platform, had grown to a decent size in the US. And we started to look at merging with them, forming a SPAC with them. SPACs kind of had their moment. There was I don't even know if it was probably not a full year, but there was maybe a year where SPACs were the latest hot thing for bringing companies together and fundraising. And frankly, we missed the sweet spot, and things had started to not work out too well for several SPACs that had been happening. So we decided to pull out of that, and we spoke together. We were still determined to come together as 2 companies, but we went away both to bring in more funding and then come back together to figure out how did we merge, how did we come together. And we went away, ran a B series. We raised $55 million led by an Italian pay tech giant called Nexi. Again, lots of the international European people in the room will know that name very well. They had never invested directly in another company before. They had bought companies but never done a straight investment. Acorns went away and did a $300 million round led by TPG, and then we came back together. And the point of coming back together was they had investing and banking with a huge amount of educational content, trying to teach and educate and enable people in America to start investing and building their wealth. Not a trading platform, just to be clear. It was all about putting money away in a diversified fund, building your wealth. And we, of course, were trying to teach kids to be smart with money, to learn about saving, to learn about investing. We talked to the kids a lot about junior ISAs and investing, but in the same way as Acorns. So we eventually managed to do a deal. It was an equity acquisition. We had to create a new company called, terrible name, Mighty Acquisition Sub, which acquired GoHenry. Then Acorns reversed into it, and then we did some jiggery-pokery sounds like it was illegal. It wasn't illegal. We took the US entity that GoHenry had out from under GoHenry, put it under Acorns, so that we kind of had US in one group, UK in another group. What I've skipped, I realise, is that immediately prior to that, in 2022, we'd acquired a French company who did very much the same as GoHenry, a copycat really, who were operating in France and had just launched in Spain. And we subsequently launched with them in Italy as well. How could I forget that bit? But merging with Acorns solved two problems. One, it solved the fact that every time I spoke to investors, I had to defend why I allowed our customers to fall off the end of our platform at the age of 18. Somebody accused me once of being a feeder for the UK high street banks, which in a way we were, but I was adamant that we didn't have deep enough pockets to compete in that market. You know, I was adamant we had to focus on our niche. It's a big niche. We had to excel at that. And for every 18-year-old that fell off the back, there was a 6-year-old coming in the front at the same time. And growth would come both from market penetration in the UK and expanding into France and then subsequently Spain and Italy, expanding into America. We were being asked to go to Saudi. We were being asked to look at India. There was lots of growth available. However, of course, once you then have a very similar education-based adult financial services operation, suddenly you've got something that fits the entire life cycle of a family. And Noah, who's the CEO of Acorns, he talks a lot about many roads in, many bridges in, and no tunnels out. In other words, there's lots of reasons to join Acorns in the States, whether it's because you've got a child, whether it's because you're a 22-year-old just starting out in your career, whether you're 30, whether you're 60, it doesn't matter. There's lots of reasons to join. And if we do our job well, there's no reason to leave. And behind all of that is underpinned with education, not in a lecture theatre style, but in small bite-size. For the kids, it's all about Quizlets and little video interactions. For adults, it's a lot about information and education at the point of decision-making, but all of it moving towards enabling people to be smart with their money, enabling people to learn about building their wealth and being in control of their financial lives. So, where does that leave us? I wanted to end on going back to our mission. It's something I'm very, very proud of. It's something that's run through the heart of GoHenry since day one. We know that children form money habits by the age of 7. So leaving financial education to later in life, or leaving it just to chance whether you ever learn about it, just doesn't make sense. I've said I often liken it to a life skill like swimming. And so in the last 5 years, what we've started to do in the UK is to lobby government. We know with GoHenry, we're a subscription service. We will never reach everybody. To give you an idea of scale, I haven't said that. In the UK, 1 in 5 kids between the ages of 8 and 12 has the GoHenry card. It is quite phenomenal. I can't even say the word phenomenal. You know, from the days where I used to go in and have to explain what it is to everyone, the minute you go into a room where there are parents or there are kids, everybody knows what GoHenry is. And worldwide, we have 6.5 million paying subscribers across the 5 countries. So we've grown we've grown quite a lot, and that has given us a voice. And so 5 years ago, what I decided is part of the duty, if you like, of that voice was to start talking to our government, whichever one was in power, about financial education and about why it isn't a mandatory part of the school curriculum. So we've been campaigning for that, lobbying for that for the past 5 years. I have been to Downing Street countless times, to the Treasury, House of Lords, House of Commons, anybody who'll listen. I was lucky enough to be asked to give evidence, they call it giving oral evidence, to the Education Select Committee on Financial Education, which took place just at the tail end of the Conservative government. We've given evidence to the Curriculum and Assessment Review, which took place as the new government came into place. And at the moment, we're waiting for the outcome of that Curriculum and Assessment Review. Lots of positive noises coming out of the government about moving the curriculum towards giving kids the life skills that they need to succeed. And obviously, from our perspective, money skills are a critical one of those life skills. And we know that the kids want it too. You know, we've done lots of research with both GoHenry members and outside, and kids want to learn about money. So whatever happens with that curriculum review, there'll be lots of work still to be done, because even if they do recommend that it's put into schools and the government does endorse that, which means it starts to happen, it's still got to be brought to life and made happen. But that could change society in a generational shift. If all of us learnt about money at school so that we came out of school confident, understanding how to budget, understanding how to save, understanding how to invest. So I'm excited for the next few years for GoHenry and Acorns and for school kids in the UK. I only had 2 slides and I knew I'd forget one of them. Look at that. So I wanted to throw the floor open for questions. I was going to say I've no idea how long I spoke for. Usually longer than I intended. But thank you. Is that on? Is that working? It is. That lets me step away from the lectern. Are there any questions? Anything anyone would like to ask? Shall I go to you first?
First of all, congratulations on the job and the company and all you have accomplished.
Thank you.
My question is a bit on the revenue stream, of course, if you can share. Are you only focused on the subscriber fee, or do you think you have the opportunity to cross-sell and to enter other products as well?
It's a great question, and we kind of take a moral standpoint on that, which is not the usual answer for a lot of businesses. If we charge a subscription fee, we can be totally transparent about what we're charging and why we're charging it. A lot of financial models, financial service company models, are based on things like transaction fees, or particularly in investment platforms, on charging a fee on each trade. we don't want a revenue model that would put our interests in conflict with the customer interest. One of the things we talk about a lot, and I haven't really touched on the culture of the company and how important that is to me and how hard we work at it. But I'm going to name no names. There are other, for example, investing platforms who charge fees on a trade. If we believe that the right thing for a customer to do is to put money away, for most people, to put money away, leave it there, let compound interest, let the stock market do its work, build their wealth, then it doesn't make sense for us to be incentivized to get them to trade. That's sort of the clearest example I can give you. A lot of the time when we're debating things, it comes down to what is the right decision for the customer. And that usually solves whatever the debate is. It might not be in the immediate financial interests of us as a company, but in the long-term interests it is, because I believe we build trust and credibility and customers stay with us. Yeah, does that answer your question? I know there was another one here. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'll come to you next.
Thank you very much for the presentation and your story. I have a question about the stage when you did the crowdfunding. Looking back at it, how would you compare the traditional going to the VCs or other investment funds compared to the crowdfunding, both in ease and investments that you did for the campaign, and also the equity that you had to give up? How would those compare? Have you...
Yeah, another good question. Well, I guess I talked about the difference between, with a VC, you usually end up with a VC representative on your board, and that from being a differentiator. One thing I would say, I've seen quite a lot of people go into a crowdfunding campaign without a lot of prep. I have to say thank you to it was the founding team who was still in place at Crowdcube. They really drilled into us the need to prep and to treat it as the biggest marketing campaign you've ever done. And we did put a lot of work into it. I mean, most crowdfunding platforms have a forum. And I have seen other people only staff that forum or man that forum for kind of 6 hours a day. We manned it 24 hours a day. There was myself, the then CEO, and she's now global head of customer support. The three of us split the day up into 8-hour shifts, and for 2 weeks we did 8-hour stints, so that we could get answers back to people quickly. And we had a giant Google sheet so that we were all talking from the same song sheet with all the FAQs prepared on it, but went back with personalised answers using the same set of facts. You have to prep. You have to prep, and you have to prep hard. And also, I think you have to be a certain type of business. We're B2C. That helps. We're very mission-led. It's very easy to describe. I think at the time of our first crowdfunding, we had about 50,000 customers. So we had a customer base we could go to. And we were known because there was advertising, there was stuff on TV, there was, somebody could look us up. We weren't... where would it be harder? A B2B SaaS company. Much harder. How do you bring that to life cleanly, clearly, for what are largely non-sophisticated investors? Does that answer? Oh, that sounded like maybe not.
Just wanted to know a bit more about that equity distribution.
Oh, the equity distribution. Crowdfunding, you kind of... you don't have that negotiation with the VC on the valuation. You pick your price. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Thank you so much for this talk. I have 2 questions, if I may. So my first question is, I wanted to ask about the early adoption of the service because it was in 2012 and having like this contactless cashless service is new. So how did you face the resistance of change from both the students or the kids and the parents? And my second question is following up on the first question related to impact and profitability. Sometimes they don't go hand in hand and they collide to one another. So how did you face this with the investors and how did you mitigate something like this? Thank you.
Right. So early adoption. It was hard. I mean, you get the early adopters, but then you obviously need to get through that stage and get into the wider public and people who are not natural early adopters. I think a lot of it had to do, I talked about word of mouth. So we tried to lean very heavily into those people that we had got. You know, if you think about the way a family and a school dynamic runs, if you have kids, you have a family and quite often other siblings in the family also have kids. So we lent into, you know, have you told your sister, have you told your brother? But also the school gate, and that's more and more a virtual school gate. It might be the class WhatsApp group, but by producing material that could be easily shared in a WhatsApp group and providing kind of refer a friend incentives to drive that was one of the ways we tried to break through. Go on, I knew I was going to forget the second one. What was the second one? Yes. So when I was raising the pre-seed funding, I mean, I can't count how many times I was virtually patted on the head and told to go and, you know, build a nice little charity, or that it needed to be an education platform. But I have all my life passionately believed that you learn by doing things, and I was absolutely adamant that it wasn't going to be a charity, it wasn't going to be an educational platform, it had to be a real life bank card. When we launched in 2012, the cards were contactless cards, and most adults didn't have a contactless card at that point in time. I think WH Smith, Tesco's and McDonald's were the only three big chains that were taking contactless payments, but we launched with a contactless card. Impact and profit. Yeah, there's a tension, but I think you ride through it. I don't think there should be too much of a tension. I think you can make a profit and be proud of making a profit, but still want to do good in the world and still want to have social impact. And so I believe we've achieved that. We also do things like lobbying government, which of course has got nothing to do with the commercials of the company. I suppose you could say it builds trust and credibility that we care about our customers, but that's a bit of a tenuous link. Hi.
Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing these amazing insights with us. I'm just curious because I know you experienced this with PixPay. So what are some of the trade-offs between building from scratch and acquiring a local player, especially when you're considering entering new markets?
I like these questions. Yes, I almost forgot about talking about PixPay. When we were ready to launch in Europe, there's another one of my plain talking things, I think. At the time, our CEO was a man called Alex Zivode, and he started talking about an organic and non-organic approach. And I could never remember which one meant we were going to buy something and which one meant we were going to build something. So I went through all the slides and crossed out literally took out the non-organic and organic and replaced it with buy or build. And we looked at both options. Honestly, and it's something that's cropped up again and again because now there are more and more competitors in the market. There are copycats in other markets where we're not. We didn't need the tag because we had the tag. What we did need was the local market knowledge. And because we're operating in a regulated space, we needed the licensing and we needed the knowledge around the nuances of the different financial regulations. I know there's a European Payment Services Directive, but it is enacted differently in every single country. So there are nuances in each country. We needed that. And the team at PixPay had probably got 170, 180,000 paying subscribers, 90% of those in France, because they'd only just launched in Spain. But Benoit won't mind if I say they walked like us, they talked like us, they were passionate about what they were doing. And we looked very hard at how many months forward would it catapult us if we bought them, versus we could, no question in my mind, we could build it from scratch, but how many months forward would we get if we bought PixPay? And through lots of analysis, we decided it was 15 months fast forward, and that was enough to tilt the decision towards acquisition.
Awesome.
Gosh, lots of...
Hey, right here.
Hi.
Yeah, so congratulations on all your success. I was a startup founder for a fintech, VC backed as well. I'm trying to understand a little bit as to what the difficulties were for you breaking into the US. You have competitors like Step Bank and Greenlight. They've all pivoted over the years to like bigger super apps.
Yep.
So what nuance is there here in the UK that allows you to be so successful that doesn't have that in the US or other geographical markets?
Greenlight launched 1 month before we launched in the US and had much more financial backing. So yeah, I mean, I remember watching them launch, and it was a bit of a stomach blow because we were not going to be first in market. Step at the time were there was a lot of noise coming from them. They got a massive wait list. I've always, you know, when members of our team have come and gone, oh my God, have you seen what this competitor's doing over here? Or have you seen what Barclays is doing? I firmly believe you watch competitors and you look at what they're doing, but you stick to your own path. So learn from them, perhaps, watch them, but if you truly know where you want to go and what you want to do, stick to your own path. So we launched in the US. We got lots of things wrong. I mean, we thought we'd covered a lot of bases. We were, you know, not arrogant enough to think you change all the S's to a Z and you can use the same language. We hired an American team, mainly not the engineering, but UX, UI, marketing, so that we had genuine local feet on the ground. It wasn't me trying to pretend I could understand another culture. And that went a long way, but we learned a lot about some of the calls to action that we use. There's one that we use again and again. We sort of repeat it every 8 months. Their card, your rules. Now, to this day, I don't know why. In the UK, in France, in Spain, in Italy, if we've got a kid with their card, and a picture of a mum or a dad, their card, your rules, we get great customers. We get customers who want to teach their kids about money, who are happy to pay the monthly fee, who intend to stay with us for 6 years, 6.5 years, whatever our average tenure is. In the US, a phrase I'd never heard before, coupon chasers. So we typically offer 1 month free. We very often offer £10 or $10 once you've signed up and activated your card. You would be amazed how many people in America are very happy to sign up, wait a week to receive their card because the post isn't as fast in the US, activate their card, get the $10, spend it, and we never see them again. I don't know. I mean, we've even talked to psychologists and specialists and all, no idea. So there was a lot of learning about what calls to action worked, what advertising worked. You know, it goes back to test, test, test. Don't push out a big campaign thinking you know the right words.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us.
Can you wave? I can't find you.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
I'm here. So I'm gonna take a step back and ask a question about the vision. So I come from development sector, and I have particularly worked in education and skill development in last 4 years. And as much as I've enjoyed this sector, I see that the solutions come to fruition few years down the line. You don't see the outcomes right away. You have to wait 2 years, 5 years, things like that. So how would you advise someone like me who is trying to explore this sector further to define an objective that is realistic, but also ambitious, but not too ambitious? Where exactly we draw a line?
Gosh, if I knew the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be standing on this stage. I don't know where I would begin to answer that. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know. Yes, gentleman with the orange box.
Thank you again for this wonderful chat. I'm curious to know that when do you exactly know this is the right time to enter the US market, and how are the investors, or what are the investors looking at, which is probably different from Europe versus in the States?
You don't know. You don't know. One of the questions I've been asked so many times is, what's the difference between an entrepreneur and somebody else? And the simplest answer I can come up with is, at some point you jump off the cliff. You don't know. You can do your research. I think you can do way too much research. At some point you've got to take that leap of faith. Yeah. Go on, shout.
And what are the investors looking at, which are different elements compared to the States and Europe?
Do you mean what are US investors looking at versus European investors? You've read this everywhere. Different risk appetite, different approach to, a different risk appetite. I mean, once we took in that late stage A series, as I called it, I can remember the first board meeting with the representative from Edison Partners, and I won't use the expletive that he used, but he said, spend that money. And that was like, God, well, that's okay. We had our plans, but his position was, no, spend double. Where can you get to? How fast can you get to? You've got the tech, you've got some of the bases in place. Let's go. Totally different from what we'd been hearing from both European and UK investors.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation, and I just love the mission aspect of it, so really appreciate hearing that. I was wondering if you might be willing to share a little bit about the co-founder relationship. That was such a charming story of you and your co-founder meet up on Thursday nights because you had a similar problem, but obviously just you gave such a highlight of the journey since then over 10 years of acquisitions of possible SPACs and all sorts of things. And so I'd love to hear some of your reflections about that co-founder relationship of what were things that worked really well, what were things that you had to learn the hard way, and any advice you would give to founders that are looking for a co-founder.
So I said that I started the business with two of the dads who both had kids at the school. They were good friends. One of them, marketing background, incredible guy. He's one of those people who can walk into a room and instantly kind of takes control of the room, fills the room, people gravitate to him. I knew we needed him to get the fundraising. I also knew that he probably wasn't going to be very interested after that point. And I'm choosing my words carefully here. He left us about 6 months in, and we bought his shares back. I suspect he might regret that today, but we bought his shares back. But could we have launched without him? Maybe. I think it would have taken us a lot longer to find the funding. He was an instrumental part in kind of creating that excitement and belief. And we used to joke about it that, you know, you go in, create the excitement and belief. Doug and I will walk in afterwards and explain the numbers and how it works. And that was very much the sort of separation of roles. Doug was with us for 2.5 years. Came from a big tech background. He was building. He was one of the team that built Sky Video on Demand, the very first version of that, and was actually doing the same thing for Ericsson in India at the time. And the financial constraints of it became too much for him, and he went back to a nice big fat corporate salary. But retained his shares, is still very much a friend of the business. So, yeah, we've had ups and downs. I often joke I'm the last man standing. But it's, you know, I work with a couple of scale-ups now who have the most incredibly tight, close, trusting co-founder relationship. And so it can work, but there are many different shapes and forms of how that pans out over the years.
Hi, Louise. Thanks for being here. One of the many. Thanks for sharing comments. So I want to start by saying, about 2 weeks before coming here, I was actually with my older brother and his wife, and they were struggling to teach their 5-year-old and 2-year-old how to use a piggy bank. So I'm excited to tell them that you exist.
Thank you.
Yeah.
At least one more person.
Yeah, so income inequality, wealth inequality is a reality that we live with. And for those households which are on the lower end of the income or wealth inequality, who might not have access to disposable income or extra time even to teach their kids financial education, which is very important. Do you have some data maybe that you have looked at as GoHenry to see how your product is being adapted by different income or wealth inequality groups? And if not, that's fine. But yeah, if not, do you know any efforts maybe with your lobbying efforts with the government to try and look at that so that, you know, these kids are going to be the future leaders tomorrow. They don't grow up keeping that same inequality where others know more about finance and money and others don't.
Yeah, really, really important. So if I said earlier that, you know, we're a subscription company, and obviously I know that means some families won't think it's worth spending the money, and other families can't even afford that amount of money. I mean, our entry-level account is $3.99 a month. That was one of the drivers behind starting to lobby government, because we looked at doing a number of things. We talked about setting up a GoHenry Foundation and somehow providing free accounts to customers who really, really needed it. But trying to figure out how we would identify people who really qualified for that was incredibly tricky. We couldn't figure out how to do it. And that was why we came up with, or I guess I drove for lobbying government, because if we can get it into every school in the UK and made mandatory, then we reach 98% of the kids in the UK. There's always going to be a couple who fall out the edges, but we will reach the vast majority of young people. You asked about the demographic. We got challenged on that at one, I can't remember which one of the investment rounds, and we hadn't looked at it before. So we did look at how our customer base maps across the UK household income demographic, and what was fascinating, we check this every 6 months now, but what was fascinating is we over-index, I'm going to wave my hands now because the household income demographic, the bell curve, we over-index really strongly on the two ends. And so, of course, immediately that's like, well, why? Why do we track it all the way through the middle, but over-index on the two ends? And so we went to a significant number of those customers and asked them. And in the really high household income, the key story was, my kids have got everything, they've got access to everything, we don't, we're in a lucky position, we don't have to worry about money. This is how I teach them the value of money. I give them their pocket money, they don't get anything else. If they want more, they have to earn it. They need to learn the life skill of budgeting, etc., and this is how I do it. So that was interesting. The other end of the spectrum, two stories really. One was families admitting that they got themselves in trouble. If you think about the, if you go back to the 80s and high credit, and a lot of people got themselves into problems with easy access to credit. And so a lot of the parents were telling us that they'd got themselves in a mess and it had taken them years to dig themselves out, or they weren't even out of it yet. And they were absolutely adamant that their kids were not going to fall into that same trap. So despite the fact they didn't have much money, they paid the $3.99 a month so that they could teach their kids.
Hello,
Yes.
thank you so much for sharing your story with us. My question is about the company culture.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you love the company culture, and I want to understand how did you go about creating that culture and then also sustaining the culture through all the changes and the growth the company has been going through?
Do you know, one of the things, in the really early days, I was just focused on what do I need to build, how do we build it, how do we get customers. But very quickly, I realized, if you founded a company, you're running a company, you're actually in a really privileged position because you can shape that company and the culture of that company to be a group of people who work the way you want to work, to the ethos that matters to you. So one of the things I did was I would be very careful not to swear. I'm sorry, I keep going to swear, and I won't, because I know this is being recorded. One of the things I made very sure throughout is our executive team has always been 50-50 men and women, and other forms of diversity as well. But, if you've got the power, use it to drive the outcomes that you believe are the right ones. So that was something, a really simple thing, but that was something I did. The culture, I think, I know how I like to work with people. I like collaboration. Obviously, you have to have a decision maker, but I like collaboration. I like to give people the space to do what they need to do. I said I knew nothing about banking. We hired in banking people. I really knew nothing about marketing, particularly not digital marketing. We hired in digital marketing experts. So my mantra was always give them the space that they need to excel. Don't micromanage. Also, in the hiring process, for a long time, I interviewed every single person and kind of made sure that I was convinced they wanted to be part of the mission. It wasn't just they wanted a salary and to be there from 9 to 5. They wanted to be part of what we were doing, and they wanted to work in the way that we wanted to work. They weren't they were team players. They were team players. What happened as we went into and then came out of COVID was, if you think about, and I know this wasn't the case for a huge number of companies, everybody was stuck at home. Nobody could shop on the high street. Shopping went online. Well, so did kids. And that accelerated our growth massively. And we went, I don't know if I can get these dates right, but we ended one financial year with a £19 million revenue, and we ended the next financial year with £42 million revenue. And that was, at that point, we were UK only. Sorry, that's not true. That is the UK only revenue. It doesn't include US. And that was all due to parents being at home with their kids and realising that they needed to let their kids operate online, but they needed to put some controls around it. So that happened. We hired in 9 months 110 people. No way on this planet I could interview all of those. So we took the time. I haven't brought my backpack with me today. I get out my little red book and wave it at you. We took the time to work with the exec team, but then actually go to the whole company and try and articulate our values. How do we work together? What's important to us? And this is going to put me on the spot because I won't remember all of them. But I mean, one of them, for example, is dare to fail. We work to trying to give people the space that if they have a bright idea, they have a concept, go and do it. And if that works, fantastic. And if it doesn't work, there will be no blame. It will just be, okay, great, well, that really didn't work. What can we learn from it? Is there an element of it we can take away? How do we grow? And we articulated that. We created the little red book of GoHenry, not Chairman Mao. And we printed it and we gave it to everybody. And to this day, everybody who joins the company gets a copy of the little red book along with their hoodie and their water bottle and all those other exciting things you send out in a new starter pack. But we also streamed that the entire way through the recruitment process, the entire way through the performance and development review process, and then took it the whole way through all of our customer touch points as well. And we work really hard on that today. Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, I stole the idea of the principles from HubSpot. I'm a great believer, if you see something good, nick it.
Hello. I wanted to ask a question. Thank you so much for this session. I wanted to ask a question around policy makers, interacting with them. What are some frustrations that you've experienced? Are there some tips that you have? Because sometimes it could feel like policymakers are not very, they're more protective of innovation than we founders. So what are some tips you've had or hacks that have been helpful for you with navigating?
Yeah, that's a good question. What can I say? It is not my natural home. That's for sure. I've had to learn a huge amount about it. You asked what's frustrating. Pace. Just, when you're from the world of being a founder and a startup or a scale-up, you're moving at an incredible pace the entire time and chasing people to move faster. Policymakers don't move fast. And then you can also get the sudden arrival of a new government and all the people you've been talking to, you've got to find their equivalents and talk to them. Tips. I'm just working on the principle of just keep going. I just keep showing up. I keep talking. We use every possible opportunity to interact with, in our case, with Treasury, with government. I try and get in touch with the government special advisor on business as much as I can. Try and tap into the things that they are talking about. So for us, the Conservatives were talking about levelling up. Well, in my head, everybody leaving school with strong money skills would be a great way to level up society. The Labour government is talking about growth. Well, we know that if people have had financial education as a child, I'll trot out one of our stats, they are 46% more likely to start a business. There's your growth. And you can extrapolate that particular stat out. That's worth about £7 billion a year to the UK economy. So try and channel your messaging towards whatever their goal is, because otherwise you're just another person standing there asking for something. I think that would be my tip.
Thank you.
I get the sense I might be the last one, so...
You were the first as well. No, you weren't. This gentleman here was. Yeah.
In any case, we've spent a not insignificant amount of time this week hearing about AI and how that's going to impact the next decade of the business landscape. Without selling the farm on what your strategy is, how do you contemplate that in your world, and what's the next 10 years look like for your GoHenry stuff?
10 years is way
5
too far
years,
ahead.
however many years.
So, I mean, AI, like most companies, we've been using a form of AI, you know, from its infancy, certainly for the last 3 or 4 years. You know, starting with the obvious ones, customer support, starting with chatbots, then agentic AI. Our advisors now are being fed constantly with next best action when they're interacting with the customer, and the AI is looking at what features is that customer using, what are their spending patterns, how do we best help that family learn more money skills, be better with the product. So that's customer support. Coding, probably 30% of our coding is done by AI. First pass coding, it's more like 60-65%. Where else? Some of our we have a money mentor in the UK and a money manager in the US. That's powered by AI. In the US, it's called Acorns Intelligence, AI. Doesn't work with GoHenry, but there we go. And do you know where I'm actually most interested at the moment is how do we get every single person in the company actively thinking and testing how can it help them in their day job. So kind of not the big areas, but you know, I know it can tell me that yet again I've not left enough time between meetings in 2 different places to get there. And crazy things like that. It didn't tell me the other day that I should get off the train in Southampton because that's where my car was. I carried on the train to my usual stop. But no, in all seriousness, every single one of us can use it to be way more efficient. And I don't think that is trickling through at GoHenry and Acorns yet in the way that it can to speed us all up and make us better.
Thank you.
I just want to thank all of you because you've asked some fantastic questions, and I think there's so much more about GoHenry, I think, which we could use in our classes here at the Side Business School. So the first case study might not be the last. I should say that I've often wondered if Louise's children had ever forgiven her for making them lose part of their pocket money because of the invoices on the fridge. But this morning, Louise's son was on the phone to her asking about the business that he was setting up as a founder and what she thought of his logo, what she thought of his graphics and his plans. And I thought, well, you know, it's really pretty lucky to have a mother who can help you like that, even if she did take your pocket money away when you were little. So we are very grateful to Louise. We are very fortunate to have Louise as one of our founders in the Side Business School community. I hope you enjoyed this afternoon and that it gives you plenty to talk about during the Drinks with Dinosaurs later at the Natural History Museum. So go forth, now the hard work starts, and please join me in thanking Louise Hill.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.